We are resuming meeting number 5 of the House of Commons Special Committee on Afghanistan. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of November 25th, 2021. I would like to remind all those present in the room to please follow the recommendations from public health authorities as well as directive of the Board of Internal Economy on October 19th, 2021 to remain healthy and safe. Should any technical challenges arise, please advise me as we may need to suspend a few minutes to ensure all members are able to participate fully. Witnesses should be aware that translation is available through the globe icon at the bottom of this. All committee members, I would like to welcome our witnesses for this panel this evening. First of all, we have Director of Afghan Canadian Interpreters, Ms. Wendy Long. With us, we also have an individual, very early morning in Turkey, Mr. David Theodore Lavery. And we also have from the third panel, from Aman Lara Group, Eleanor Taylor, and we also now, I can see that we also have the Executive Director, Brian McDonald. So everyone is on board. So welcome, and each group of witnesses have 5 minutes. Please watch your time for the opening remarks. Now we will start with Ms. Long. Please begin. Ms. Long, you're mute. Can you? Thank you.
Okay, sorry. Thank you. Merci, Mr. Chair. ACI is a grassroots volunteer group that started initially 5 years ago, originally in support of one interpreter. A Facebook page was set up to support this effort, and I quickly realized that there was no real way to bring these allies to Canada. In 2017, I made contact with an immigration law firm who submitted 2 humanitarian and compassionate applications pro bono. 2019, 2020, I submitted a private sponsorship applications for another interpreter as well as 3 other ones for vulnerable young Afghans in Indonesia. In November 2018, I launched a letter writing campaign addressed to Minister Hussein and posted it on the Facebook page. Red Tea also represents over 140,000 translators and interpreters from around the world, also wrote multiple open letters appealing to Canada for a process. As the Doha peace talks progressed, the pleas for an immigration process mounted and concerns started coming in from veterans worried about those left behind. Some veterans had spent thousands of dollars in attempts to get interpreters here without results, adding to their mental anguish. Since 2018, I had started compiling files, and by the time MP Pawlowski reached out to me in January 2021, I had collected over 22 files. I would like to thank MP Pawlowski and Robert St-Aubin for their incredible work and tireless efforts and dedication on this front. We both worked diligently, ACI in gathering files together and forwarding them to Rob to action. Slowly, our ACI volunteer base grew and media attention was growing as the situation in Afghanistan continued to deteriorate, though Canada still had no process and time was running out. May 2021, ACI launched our Afghan Canadian Interpreters Relocation Assistance Initiative. June 1st was an open letter on behalf of ACI and 15 other international advocacy groups was sent to the Prime Minister as well as Ministers Mendicino, Garneau, Sejan, and other NATO heads of state. The following week, we had our first meeting with IRCC, facilitated by MP Pawlowski. In this meeting, we stressed the following, that we needed a fast and effective means to get people initially assessed and then more completely processed in either Canada or elsewhere. We stressed there was no time or money for passports if people didn't already have them and recommended a refugee-type approach. Most applicants had no access to laptops or printers, and that and process would have had to be a cell phone based process, as other methods would expose the applicant to identity theft, fraud, or death. Extended family for new and old SIM applicants. All dependent family members to be included in the application process, as many households are combined with widowed parents, nieces, nephews of deceased parents, or single female siblings. In June, we ramped up our intake efforts with our own intake form and document request. By July 1st, we had 117 principal applicant files, what was increasing daily. Finally, on July 22nd, a process was announced, the most generous and all-encompassing of our NATO partners. July 28th, email applications were sent out and panic ensued with a 72-hour deadline. Hundreds of veterans jumped into action to assist their Afghan allies to complete these forms. We mobilized groups like Northern Lights Canada and a vast network of even Afghan refugees in places like Indonesia to assist as well. The embassy and IRCC staff worked diligently and did all they could with the tools and instructions they were given. Unfortunately for so many, Canada had left too little time to do the job right, and Afghanistan fell to the Taliban August 15th. Any hope for a swift but orderly evacuation went out the window, effectively leaving thousands behind again. ACI makes the following recommendations moving forward: that we find an effective biometric solution, urgent need to address the backlog of emails and applications that have not yet received any response, removing the eligibility requirement to be in Afghanistan on or after July 22nd for all SIM applicants, effective and consistent means to move those without passports, declare prima facie for Afghans outside Afghanistan in order to facilitate private sponsorships and increase sponsorship agreement holder spots. In closing, increased and effective communication and cooperation continue to grow between IRCC, GAC, CAF, and organizations like Aman Laura and ACI. A surge in successful evacuations is evidence that this cooperation is effective and key in accomplishing our goals. Thank you.
You're on mute, Mr. Chair.
Right, okay.
Okay, sorry. Thank you, Ms. Long. Perfect timing. And now we will go to Aman Lara. Between Ms. Taylor and Mr. McDonald, you have 5 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Sheltered Path Aman Lara is the nonprofit organization of veterans, former interpreters, and volunteers who get good people out of bad places. Aman Lara means sheltered path in Pashto, and we were founded in the midst of this crisis by veteran Drummond Fraser and his chief interpreter, Zabiola Hamdard. We exist because Canada needs an organization to support the evacuation of Afghans, both those who helped our war effort and those who worked alongside us to advance Canadian democratic principles. Abandoning these people to a desperate fate at the hands of the Taliban is unacceptable. We need to redeem our national honor and ensure that they come to Canada. Every life we save is a victory. Since our inception, Sheltered Path has helped almost 2,000 Afghans escape the Taliban. This month alone, we have evacuated 79 families for a total of 449 people, each a valuable life, each a person who could make Canada stronger. The situation in Afghanistan is fluid, but right now, the problem with getting people out isn't the Taliban, it's the process. And we work closely with the Canadian government. We only move people who have a pathway to Canada and are approved by the IRCC. Once approved, we move people that very week. And yet, we have over 10,000 people on our list that are stuck in Afghanistan. Over half of them have applied, but have not yet been acknowledged by the Government of Canada. We can't consider moving them until they are in the IRCC system. Of the remaining 5,000 people who are in the Canadian system, each needs at least one more step in the process to be ready to move. The crucial step is the confirmation of identity, biometrics. It's an essential security check to ensure that applicants are who they say they are. As Canada has no government presence in Afghanistan, the only way to confirm identity is to travel to a third country. Since we can't confirm identity in Afghanistan, applicants need a passport and a visa to get to a third country for processing. This adds 2 additional steps, which are controlled by 2 foreign governments, with all of the accompanying bureaucracy, delays, and risks. 2/3 of our people don't have passports. To get a passport, Afghans are effectively telling the Taliban that they want to get away from them. Imagine you're trying to flee the Taliban, but to do so, you need to travel to an office that's controlled by the Taliban and give them your name, the names of your family members, your address, all the fingerprints and photos of your family to the Taliban. Doing this exposes our people to great danger. As well, getting a visa to a third country is another obstacle. It exposes these families to another level of risk, and it can be expensive and time-consuming. If we find a way to confirm identity inside Afghanistan, we could skip the steps of getting a passport and visa and bypass the involvement of foreign governments we cannot control. With those obstacles removed, Amin Laura could move a quarter of our list almost immediately. We could move these 2,500 people directly to Canada, clear the backlog, and free up government resources to process the remaining 7,500. Finding a way to confirm identity in Afghanistan is our number 1 priority. We need the government of Canada to work with us to find a solution.
There is another important group stuck in Afghanistan. These are the people who risked their safety to advance Canadian democratic principles. They are the women leaders, the human rights advocates, the journalists and those who assisted Canadian journalists, the LGBTQ community, and members of Afghanistan's persecuted ethnic and religious minorities. For them to even apply to Canada, they must be outside of Afghanistan and be registered as refugees. Except they cannot get out of Afghanistan. These people are stuck in an unimaginable catch-22. We need to create a pathway for them to come to Canada. Let's turn our attention to the events unfolding in Ukraine. We are shocked by the unprovoked Russian invasion, but we are encouraged to see the extraordinary and flexible immigration measures IRCC has put in place. Unlike the requirements for Afghans, families in the Ukraine do not need to attain refugee status to come to Canada. Temporary residence permits and single journey forms are being used to overcome policy obstacles. These measures should be applied in Afghanistan. The mechanisms exist. Let's use them. In conclusion, we have 3 requests of government. 1, work with us to find a way to confirm identity in Afghanistan. 2, respond to the vast number of applicants who have not yet had their application acknowledged. And 3, apply the immigration measures envisioned for Ukraine to Afghanistan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. McDonald and Ms. Taylor. And now we will go to Mr. Laveri from Turkey. Thank you for being with us today. And please go ahead. You have exactly 5 minutes to say.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and ladies and gentlemen of the special committee. My background briefly, I'm David Lavery, former non-commissioned officer of the Canadian Armed Forces, retired January 2000. I then served with the United Nations Department of Safety and Security, where I was asked to go in with a special team after 9/11. We provided humanitarian assistance throughout 5 years in that country. I retired, moved on to private sector. In 2010, I ventured back into Afghanistan, supporting a great Canadian risk mitigating company called CanPro. We set up holistic life support. We were able to deliver a lot of areas of expertise to many clients and charities for 11 years. Early July, I was approached by many people that you're familiar with that were previous guests and speakers, VTN, ACI, the generals, and now Amin Laura and much more, asking me if I would be in a position to assist the Canadian initiative and help out the specific strategy with risk mitigation, ground truth support, secure accommodations, and much more. My team immediately went into work and working tirelessly to try to get these families into safe locations. and assisting. Most of those families, in most cases, were in serious jeopardy from the Taliban. 15th of August, as we know, the fall of Afghanistan. Taliban entered the city without a shot fired. Purely the myth and the psyche of pure evil was in the mindsets of everyone, which in turn created catastrophic events into unprecedented scale. The sheer panic and despair created a desperate state situation at every level. Desperate times equated desperate measures, as we all witness. This was the worst experience I've ever witnessed in my lifetime. Specific points to address. Point one, members of the asset team started in earnest with our collected partners to prepare for the inevitable evacuation of our Afghan applicants. Members of our team tried to reach out to numerously, both back to Canada, GAC, IRCC, and CAF to offer our support, provide them with our updates, capabilities, with little to no response or interest. In Kabul, I tried the same with the Canadian Embassy and their representatives of GAC, with failed concerns and failed interests, I should say. The lack of interest or will to engage with our asset at all levels had significant impacts. Point two, there was no representative of the Canadian Embassy on the ground. The ambassador and his team, their non-presence had a significant impact to getting out our Canadian Afghans and their applicants and families. Point three, I'm proud of our Canadian military, and I'm sure there's an explanation why our military was not on the ground in advance to support our evacuation process in a timely manner. There were no CAF in our area until the evening of the 20th. It appears, from my personal observation, our military presence, at least in the area where I was operating, it seemed like they were limited in their capabilities, and it appeared they were restricted, as if somebody was holding them back. Lack of communication, point four, with an expert panel of veterans, others supporting one of the worst crises in modern day history, why CAF, GAC, IRCC, CAC did not tap into reliable and trusted individuals and agency. Who goes into a serious operation without tapping into known entities that have been on the ground prior to the event? And point five, I'd like to know why the Canadian government refused to evacuate my wife on that night when the Canadian military came in. At that point in time, they put us, and I say us, asset, in a very uneasy term. I was there to assist with the evacuation, and they wanted to get me out of there without my wife going, putting my wife on that plane. In closing, my emphasis on time spent in Afghanistan is important to understand the resources and capabilities that were offered and never utilized by the government. Sadly, as we watched and assisted as best we could with the resources we had, we worked in isolation to CAF, GAC, and IRCC during those horrific days. The synergy, the expertise working together would have seen different results. Please, let's learn those lessons. We have proven our value, our capabilities, our credibility, and our resolve. The government needs to invest into the professional partners of asset, such as Amalora, ACI, to continue supporting our Afghan families left behind. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Laveri. You saved us a few seconds in time. So without any further ado, I will go to the round one with my conservative colleague, Mr. Raff. 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. And first off, my thanks to all our panelists tonight. Wow, Canada and Afghanistan owes you all a debt of gratitude for everything that you've been doing from day one. Wendy, you go back so long on everything that you've done. And Dave, my first question is to you, Mr. Lavery, because of your background and experience. And I just want you to maybe provide a little bit more context on the signs and signals of we knew this was coming and that we should have been better prepared in starting that evacuation in a timely manner. Can you elaborate, please?
Sure, thank you. Yes, we should have been better prepared, and we were doing the best we could as a collective body. So that's what caught most of us off guard. We were anticipating the inevitable. Why wasn't senior leadership and the government doing the same? The signs were there. Everybody were seeing those signs. We were passing this on back in July. Wendy and her team were advocating years before this. So the signs were there. We just don't understand. And the senior generals on our team our godfathers, and all the other senior veterans that you're looking at right now, they spoke so many times at so many levels, trying to gain interest, saying it was almost like we were treated as a rogue entity. The signs were there. The Afghans themselves, you could see the economy, the bank system. You could see what was actually happening inside Kabul at that point of time. And remember, the government itself, they were starting to frail. They were unfolding in front of us. Other nations and the Canadian embassy at that point of time in Afghanistan, they were not wanting to engage with our team. The Canadian military weren't wanting to listen to us. So we could see the signs. Why didn't anybody else? So I guess I'd have to stop there and maybe let the rest of my colleagues jump in.
Yeah, well, thanks, Mr. Lavery. I think I'm going to direct it and build off that to Ms. Long. You talked in your recommendations the importance of the collaboration between IRCC, the CAF, GAC, NGOs like yourself, and everybody else on this call. And one of the questions that other witnesses have presented in their testimony is that lack of coordination, lack of one sort of ministry that's in charge, and that lack of impact of the embassy basically pulling out so early and not having that leadership. Can you just expand on who you think should be in charge dealing with this going forward, and maybe the impact, having tracked it from day one, of not having that coordination going on in August?
I think ultimately, I can't speak to which entity should be in charge, but there should be someone that should be in communication. It should be a team effort. So the CAF is responsible for for confirming who, in fact, worked for and assisted our Department of National Defense. The embassy obviously knows who worked for them. IRCC basically is the entity that ultimately is in charge of who comes to Canada, and there needs to be effective liaising with the NGOs and in case management, and as well with the other departments like GAC and CAF. So all of them have to work effectively together, and that's not what was happening all along. There was no effective partnership, and not looking at it as a mission that all three entities should have been taking a part of for the end goal of getting our people to Canada.
Thanks, Ms. Long. You spoke in your recommendation as well about the lack of response from IRCC from, the people who have reached out emails. Could you just reiterate that number? Approximately how many Afghans have failed to get any response yet from the Government of Canada or IRCC? You're on mute.
I would have to turn to Eleanor. It's a good 50%, I believe Brian had said, that have not received any response from IRCC.
Okay. Ms. Taylor, go ahead.
That's correct. 52% of those who are in our system of about 10,000 have not yet had their applications acknowledged.
Thanks, Ms. Taylor, and thanks again for your leadership. But my last question will go to you and Mr. McDonald. It's to build off my previous question again on who do you think needs to be leading this, especially to resolve this biometric question in country, because I think that's absolutely the essential criteria that needs to be fixed to get people out.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Ruff. I mean, it's got to be a cooperative effort, and I think that we at Amin Lara have are trying to come up with a solution. And I think that NGOs can be part of this solution. I think that there's ways to provide identity verification in Afghanistan. And we are looking forward to working with the Government of Canada, through this committee potentially to provide those solutions.
You still have 20 seconds left, Mr. Ruff. You want to?
Yeah, well, I'd just leave it actually to Ms. Taylor if she could just, wrap up, what the biggest thing, no matter what, that needs to happen.
Now it's going to be 6 minutes, so I'm sorry. So thank you very much, Mr. Ruff. Appreciate that. Go to Mr. El Khoury for 6 minutes, please. Go ahead.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Et
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson, and welcome to our witnesses and invited guests. The situation in Afghanistan is not a normal one. My question is directed at Mr. MacDonald. Mr. MacDonald, in your experience, could you please tell us and tell the members of the committee if there are countries that offer biometrics services in the country itself?
Well, thank you for the question. Obviously, this is very sensitive material, and I understand we're in a public forum. But I will say this: Amin Laura has reached out to other Canadian entities that have established security records with the government of Canada. For example, almost all of our staff are former military, so have at one point held a high security clearance. There are other entities in Canada, for example, Reticle out of Brockville, that have these security clearances, and there are solutions that can be found. And so I do believe that we can provide a service in Afghanistan. It's a little difficult for the government of Canada to contract it directly, but I think organizations like ours, NGOs that can operate in Afghanistan, could potentially gather that information on the government's behalf and then provide that to the government of Canada in a secure format, with the appropriate equipment and the appropriate security clearances to provide a high level of service. And that's the sort of thing we are advancing, and we hope that the government of Canada will take us up on the offer.
vous savez, la situation.
You know that we had a great experience with the Syrian refugees. It was much easier for the Canadian government because the Syrians were outside their country, and yet it's the opposite in Afghanistan. In your opinion, are there countries that authorize the entry of persons without visas and without passports?
There are countries that have been used, they call them lily pad countries. For example, the United Arab Emirates has provided some service for people that are undocumented that can travel from Afghanistan to places like Dubai, where there's a special humanitarian village. I mean, the challenge is that there's a lot of people that have already done that. So if we use the Dubai example, that humanitarian village is full, and it's full of people who can't seem to find onward passage to another country. And so they have stopped accepting people. And that's the challenge that we face. We would be quite happy. I mean, Amin Laura, we look at whatever route we can find to get people out of Afghanistan, but we have to make sure they have an onward route to Canada. And, so that's why verifying their identity and getting full approval before they leave Afghanistan is so crucial. These third-party countries exist, but right now and we are exploring them as avenues, but in most cases, they're already full. And until the people that are there move on, we can't put any more people into that system. That's the challenge we face.
Merci. Ma deuxième question.
Thank you. My next question is for Ms. Eleanor Taylor. Ms. Taylor, have there been cases where flights were cancelled?
So I'm going to seek some clarification, which there may have been. I'm not aware of a specific flight. I have no knowledge of that.
Al-Khoury.
Okay.
Understood. Why does the Taliban guarantee the safety of Canadian officers and contractors, for example, to conduct biometrics in the country itself?
I think is this still to me?
Yes, please.
Yes.
Go ahead, Ms. Taylor.
So, I mean, certainly we are not in direct communication with the Taliban, and we can't suggest that they guarantee anything. But what we can say, and Mr. Lavery could corroborate this, is that we have been highly successful with the support of Raven Ray Resources and their team in moving around Afghanistan. And there are mechanisms by which we can bring people in and get people out. And so the notion of executing a team to perform the function that Mr. MacDonald described is imminently possible based on our pretty robust experience.
Al-Khoury, you have 1 minute, please. Go ahead.
Monsieur Lavery,
Mr. Lavery, in your experience when you operated over there, was it the Taliban that was in power or not? And what can you tell us? What can you do to better ensure the safety of women currently in Afghanistan, based on your experience, that is again?
30 seconds, Mr. Lavery.
That's the loaded one, but let me quickly go. Yes, Taliban right now, the de facto authorities of Afghanistan, they do have complete control of everything at this stage, and they are clamping down. And how can we better support the women that are still in Afghanistan? Again, that's going to be, I think, political a political intervention where we're going to have diplomatic resolve at higher level, keeping pressure on the de facto government right now to try to keep an even abreast and try to hold them accountable, because they are still under the limelight. They are on the spotlight right now. But as we see the campaign, the war efforts going on in Ukraine, that's going to have dynamic effects on Afghanistan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lavery, and thank you, Mr. Al-Khoury. Perfect timing. We will go to my dear friend on the block side, Mr. Brunel de Sepp. 6 minutes, please. Go ahead.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson, and thanks to the witnesses for being with us today. Thank you for what you've done, what you continue to do, and in advance what you're going to do in the near future for Afghans. It's really important in this committee. We're focusing on the humanitarian crisis, what we can do now and in the short term. There are a lot of NGOs that have testified before this committee and have said to what extent it is difficult to do their work to provide humanitarian services in Afghanistan because, among other things, the Taliban are considered a terrorist entity and, by virtue of that fact, can be prosecuted under the Canadian Criminal Code because it's dealing with terrorists. It's not their fault, but if they want to do their job, they have to do so. 2 weeks ago, I moved a motion calling on the government to ensure that guarantee that NGOs wouldn't be prosecuted when they provide humanitarian assistance in the most threatened areas. Unfortunately, the Liberal Party, which is very well represented here, refused to pass my motion, and I'm wondering what message that sent to NGOs out in the field, given that that motion wasn't passed. If I could hear from you in order, Mr. McDonald, Ms. Taylor, Mr. Long, Mr. Lavery, etc. Thank you.
Mr. McDonald, go ahead, please.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, you're absolutely right. There is a challenge certainly with dealing with the Taliban or providing aid in Afghanistan because it is an identified terrorist organization. I'm not a lawyer. I can't speak to legalities of it. What I can tell you is that we conduct operations despite the Taliban, and that we do our best to assure the safety of people in country, and we follow the law and we get people out of there, and we work closely with the Canadian government to do it. And so with those principles in mind, we assure the security of our people and ensure that they can get out of Afghanistan.
Ms. Taylor, you have anything to add? No. Ms. Long, go ahead, please.
Thank you. ACI doesn't directly and has never given any kind of money or has had in-country operations, though I do understand how NGOs can be handcuffed by that legislation. I'm not really in a position to comment on what needs to be done to facilitate their ability to work within that sphere.
Mr. Lavery, go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. That is a very hot topic to begin with, but I can assure the panel that all our members, my members, supporting the asset team, we govern ourselves with the best practice. We do not provide the de facto government direct funds. We cannot do that at this stage. We will not. Humanitarian assistance and work and funds and development towards that. We know the UN is doing it. We know the UN is being provided support from the de facto government in providing escorts to move their charitable goods and their catering out into the field. So it is happening at other levels, you know. So, but from our team, and I was back in country last December, and I was meeting with many of the de facto government people in the Minister of Interior, the police departments, etc. So they've never come right out asking for funds or any of that kind of stuff. So it was one of those situations where we're not put into that position. But it is a sensitive area that we all have to be aware of. And I think it should be something that we should look closer at from the government's point of view.
Mr. Brunel de Sepp, you have 2 minutes.
Oui, merci.
Thank you very much. Mr. Levery, I was really touched by your testimony. And I'd like to hear what you have to think about this. What was your greatest disappointment vis-a-vis the government and the humanitarian crisis? So what is, first, that's my first question. And secondly, what would be your suggestions as far as what this committee should do to help Afghans out on the ground right now?
Mr. Laveri, go ahead, please.
Thank you very much. My biggest disappointment would have been leaving all the people behind that we didn't need leaving behind. We left so many people back there and living it for 12 days in and out, and dealing with all our people on this panel, trying to get as many people out and watching something unfold that we should have a better grip of. Our government could have done a better job. We should have been in dialogue, as we heard from all the other guest speakers. We should have had better coordination, and with better coordination, better planning, and appointing a perfect organization. I'm not going to blow our own horns, but I can tell you right now, it is working. We're the only ones getting people the way we're getting them out. Give us the opportunity to get more people out and work with us, and we will work with the government. That is the biggest message right now. We can do it. We're showing we're doing it, and we need the support. We shouldn't be carrying and heavy lifting all of this on our own. This is a collective event. And the objective is to get everybody out. This is no longer an evacuation phase. We're now moving people out. Okay, so the crisis has gone over, and now we're worried that it's going to shift elsewhere.
Mr. Brunel de Sepp, you have 6 seconds, so you're caught. You have only 6 seconds.
Monsieur Levery, pensez-vous?
6 seconds. Well, Mr. Levery, do you think we'll get the 40,000 refugees by next year as the government promised?
Yes or no, time is up.
If you leave it for Amalora and us, yes, we will.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Brunel de Sepp. Now we will go to our last member of parliament on this panel, her round. Madam Kwan, 6 minutes, please. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for your service and for your continuous effort. I'd like to ask all the panelists this question. You all raised the point that there are things that you can do, that you have talked to officials about it. I guess my question is, when did you talk to these officials? Who are they, and what was their response? Maybe I can start with Ms. Long and go in the direction in which each presenters appeared.
Okay, Madam Long, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes. So originally, you start with your MP, and actually, my MP was very aware that I had been advocating for first one Afghan interpreter and then others. In January of 2019, I had compiled a letter and an appeal from various veterans and current military to him to present to Minister Hussen at the time, appealing for a meeting with them or with him or a point person. Nothing came out of it. I followed up on it for the next month, and there was just no response from the minister or someone from that department. I felt IRCC, it had to be the point person. There was no actual policy in place to bring these people over, and it had to be a public policy decision. Given the current immigration measures that were in effect at that time, there had to be a new public policy or an implementation of a previous one. So IRCC had to be the entity that needed to be in discussion with, and MP Pawlowski had been trying for years as well as other veterans that had raised it back in 2006, 2007, in the Thunder Bay area as well.
Mr. McDonald, go ahead, please.
Yeah, thanks very much. We, we consider ourselves partners with the government of Canada. So we have, we have regular meetings with officials from IRCC and Global Affairs Canada. We meet with them almost weekly. And as well, we have weekly meetings with ministerial staff. And I must say, I am impressed with the attention they give us. And, they certainly give us time. They listen to our requests. We have a good flow of information. We have made these points to you tonight, and we've made them to them. And, I do understand that these situations are challenging. I mean, none of these requests are easy. We are continuing to work with them. And as my colleague, Ms. Taylor, said tonight, I mean, we are optimistic. And when we see the measures that have been applied to the Ukraine, in these dialogues with officials and ministerial staff, we're going to push them in that direction. We need them to bring these measures to Afghanistan, so we have a pathway for these, in particular, the humanitarian cases and people that are undocumented. So we have good access, we have good dialogue on a regular basis with staff. And as I said, like right from the beginning, I'm, optimistic that we will come to them with a solution to do identity verification in Afghanistan, and hopefully we can get them across the finish line and get that option implemented. And I want to stress, while he's on the call tonight. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. I'm going to move on to Mr. Lavery, because I need to hear from all the witnesses, please.
Mr. Lavery, go ahead, please.
Yes, I'll comment on the very beginning. Back in July, we did reach out to all the key people in the Canadian Embassy, the security department, their program managers. We tried reaching out to the charge d'affaires, the deputy, sent a message off to them and the ambassador. And the common response, especially when we were in the early stages, we're too busy. We don't really have time for you, and, that type. So we kept on coming back at them. We utilized our team in Canada to try to get influence, to try to get the spark going. And it just seemed like there was, maybe they were overwhelmed. Maybe they were preoccupied with other issues, but the desire and the will to try to engage at that stage, they pushed us aside. And that was, I guess, one of the pivotal points for us, was the Canadian Embassy's lack to engage at that point in time, not just only with me on the ground, but with our senior personnel back with the team back in Canada. So that's all I would pass on at this stage.
Thank you. One of the key issues, of course, the reference with Ukraine was raised. The call for visa-free is going to be essential for Ukraine, and the government hasn't acted on that yet. And so I guess similarly in this instance, dealing with the biometrics issue is key so that people can get out, and waiving those documentations. In terms of this, is your number one call for the government then is to waive the biometrics or engage with NGOs on the ground to get this work done, to get people to safety? So maybe going with Mr. Lavery, and then Ms.
Thank
Long.
you. 30 seconds, please. Go ahead.
Yes, very quick. I think you'd want to do both, engage with the talent on the ground, and also have a waiver in place, but making sure that you have the capability through that reliable partner on the ground. Maybe I can turn it over to Eleanor or Wendy.
My apologies, struggling with my mute button. I think that our number one priority in Aminlar is most certainly a way to confirm identity in Afghanistan. And we understand that the government of Canada has a responsibility to confirm identity. And I want to make it clear that there sometimes is a perception that Canada requires a passport. Canada does not require a passport. The Afghan passport is required for Afghans who are leaving Afghanistan to cross the Pakistani border. That's not a requirement of the government of Canada. But yes, we think that we can deliver that requirement of the government of Afghanistan either directly or indirectly in support of them in that confirmation of identity piece.
Thank you very much. It's 7 minutes. So the time is up. And on behalf of the members of parliament and on behalf of this committee, I want to thank you, Ms. Long, Ms. Taylor, Mr. McDonald, and Ms. Lavery for the pertinent information and the knowledge that you brought to this committee. All the best to all of you. Thank you. And you can log off, and we'll wait for the next panel members to get on board.
Thank you very much. Good night.
Merci. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Just want to do a microphone test. Can you hear me okay?
Just 1 second. Mr. Chair, would you suspend, please?
Yes, the meeting is suspended for 2 minutes. thank the interpreters for being so generous with this difficult situation. On behalf of the committee, I would like to welcome both the witnesses as individuals. We have Mr. Corey Shelton, and also with us, we have Mr. Stephen Peddle. And you have 5 minutes each, and I would like one of you to go first, and whoever want to, but I will give, otherwise I'll let Mr. Peddle, you go for 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
All right, thank you very much. So thank you once again for inviting me here this evening. I'm a retired member of the Canadian Armed Forces. I retired as a senior intelligence officer at the rank of major. I did deploy to Afghanistan for the first time to Kandahar in 2007, and then again as the Task Force J2 in 2012 for op attention. During the initial tour, I had the pleasure of being a member of the Omelette team under, at that point in time, Colonel Wayne Eyre, now General Eyre, obviously. And I was embedded with a Kandak of approximately 500 Afghans. And it was during that time that I was introduced to Afghan interpreters, as being that I was an S3 and S2, and within a Kandak that is an operations officer and their intelligence officer, it was very important for me to be able to communicate with the Afghan officers, the Afghan troops, and the Afghan citizens that we were interacting with out in the battle space. So it was during that particular mission that I befriended a guy named Sangeen, who is still in my life today. And he's the person from which I was contacted last summer to help his family, who were in dire need of help due to the unfolding events in Afghanistan. His family in particular were also quite involved with helping Canada, as his brother was an interpreter as well, who went on afterwards to work for ATCO and KBR. And his father was not an interpreter, but he was a senior officer with the Afghan National Army. He was a colonel. So again, another high profile potential target for the Taliban. And for that reason, Sangeen reached out to me to assist his family to get out of Afghanistan. And that's where I became involved in this particular committee and involved with the government of Canada's response at that time to get the Afghans out before, of course, things folded at the end of the summer of 2021. During that particular time, I had numerous dealings with the IRCC. I had dealings with the SJS within the Canadian Armed Forces for vetting Afghan interpreters. I also had dealings with the embassy, and I took a front seat approach to assisting with some of the paperwork that these Afghan families were trying to fill out and trying to get them clarity when they were on the ground as to the paperwork requirements to get on those planes eventually and come to Canada, because at the time there was quite a bit of conflicting information. I know it was a very chaotic time in Afghanistan in July and August of 2021, but I witnessed it personally as these folks were asking me to intervene and contact various members of our government and just to get clarity, I guess, on the requirements that they needed to fulfill in order to move through the vetting process and immigrate to Canada. And just to clarify, Sangeen did come to Canada 10 years before, in about 2012. It was February 2012, under that special Afghan interpreter relocation program that was offered, what I believe, between 2009 and 2012. I could be wrong on those dates, but I know he did come February of 2012, and he has been in Canada for 10 years. And I have had dealings with him, personal contact over the past decade since he's come to Canada.
Thank you, Mr. Peddle. So right and 4 minutes mark. That's great. And now we will go to Mr. Shelton for 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Good evening. I'd just like to make sure you can hear me still. Thank you, everyone, for having me today. My name is Corey Shelson. I served in the Canadian Armed Forces from 2002 until 2015, which included an 8-month deployment to Afghanistan in 2010 as a combat engineer troop commander. Before I begin, I would like to first acknowledge the tragic events that are currently occurring in Ukraine and express my heartfelt sympathy for all of those affected by Russia's brutal actions. In addition, I wish to express my admiration for President Zelensky, for his leadership, and to the Ukrainian armed forces who continue to defend themselves with courage and bravery in the name of freedom. I would also like to acknowledge and express my appreciation to all of the members of the Canadian Armed Forces who served during Canada's mission in Afghanistan, including those who risked their lives to evacuate affected Afghans. None of what occurred in Afghanistan should have come as a surprise, except the speed at which the Taliban took the country. My aim for today is simple. It's to tell you what I experienced during my involvement during the evacuation and provide this committee with a list of failures that I observed, which I hope will drive further root cause analysis in order to derive some lessons learned for future non-combatant evacuation operations. I would like to first list a few key dates. July 1st, 2021, which is when I came across a news article stating that the US had withdrawn from the Bagram airfield. July 5th is when I got formally involved when an interpreter that I served with, who was previously resettled through the Special Immigration Program between 2009 and 2012, reached out asking for my assistance to help his family get to Canada. July 8th, 2021, an open letter was penned by 3 previous task force commanders, General Milner, Fraser, and Thompson. And that letter was calling for the immediate evacuation of stranded Afghans. July 23rd, 2021, Minister Mendocino outlined what he described as a flexible and inclusive plan to relocate several thousand Afghan affected individuals. August 4th, that was when the first plane load arrived in Canada. August 15th, that's when the Taliban took Kabul. August 30th, which was when the evacuation ended, and February 28th, which is today, many, if not all of the applicants that I began supporting are all still without a response, most of whom who have not received a G number, and most of whom do still not have a pathway to Canada. The first issue I would like to address is our post-military campaign responsibilities. When Canada deploys troops, we must understand that our mission does not end with their return. I believe that we have damaged our credibility on the international stage by our behavior. And remember that history cannot be rewritten, and our actions are what will be remembered. On that note, I would like to highlight that for those interpreters who served with the Canadian Armed Forces and who were resettled between 2009 and 2012, the pathway for SIMS application did not actually open until December 9th, 2021. And I do not personally know of any who have made it to Canada. Number 2, the bureaucratic application process. Forms that could only be opened in Adobe Acrobat Reader DC Pro. Forms which needed to be signed, scanned, and returned. This demonstrated a lack of sensitivity to the situation on the ground and placed affected individuals at undue risk. A lack of sensitivity by a lack of translation into Pashto and Dari during our initial emails that were sent out. The number of email addresses that were being asked to respond to, most of which people could not spell. Why were we even using email in the first place? How is it that we can't put together a more efficient manner to collect this information like a portal? Our technical inabilities in a digital-first world are absolutely appalling. It's also very eye-opening. I can tell you that if our government were a private business, we would be out of business. Our lack of agility. The following information that I'm going to tell you was gathered through interactions with a number of individuals. I would like to ask that this be further investigated. The first piece of information is that when the Special Immigration Program was announced, the IRCC only had 2 people triaging inbound emails. Around that same time, a call went out to internal government departments looking for volunteers to take a contract inside the IRCC. That call went out to the CRA, Service Canada, and volunteers were screened and told they would begin any day. Workers did not start until September, which was already after the evacuation ended. Everybody started answering phones, and it wasn't until October that some of these folks were asked to start triaging emails. They were instructed to only look at emails from August 23rd onward, and it took until early November for all of the emails to be processed. These facts are disturbing, considering the number of people who were waiting by their computer, waiting for a response from the IRCC.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shelton. Your time is up. And now we will proceed to the round of questions. And the first person that will go is Madam, sorry, there is an echo somehow. Miss Finlay for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I want to thank both witnesses immensely for your service, your deployment in Afghanistan, your service overall. Stephen, I know you. I congratulate you as well in the honor of being invested in the Knight of St. George. This first question is for Corey, if I may call you that. Are you aware of any flights that left that should have been full that were not full?
Mr. Shelton.
I can comment on the flight that arrived on August 4th. My understanding from our sources that approximately 40 individuals got off that plane. And my understanding is that that plane was basically filled with embassy staff, families, and some key staff that were working for the embassy. I found it interesting that Mr. Mendocino was waiting on the tarmac to greet these folks, and then spinning the media to make it seem like that was an evacuation flight, when I do not believe that was an evacuation flight. You got to remember, a C-17 holds 188 people. To put 40 people on a plane during an evacuation that had already been announced is absolutely disgusting.
And do you have any thoughts as to why that happened that way?
Well, I'm going to hazard to guess that it had to do that the application process was simply too bureaucratic and too slow, and they probably didn't have any other applicants that had approved applications at that point.
Major Peddle, can you tell me, you've talked about your relationship with the interpreters, and we've heard testimony in this committee that some of the allies that were helping, Afghanistan allies, weren't just there to help with language, sometimes with culture and navigating generally in a strange environment. Can you just give us a little more detail on what you went through to bring those people out of Afghanistan that you helped?
Mr. Peddle, go ahead. You are on mute. Could you please unmute yourself? You're still on mute. I'll take 30 seconds off.
Okay, there we go. Thank you very much. My apologies once again. Used to my home office with the technology there. Yes, so my initial take on everything was, as previously mentioned, the complication of the paperwork, the format that it had to be done, that these folks who didn't have internet access were in provinces outside of Kabul and going to internet cafes to get internet access, which at that point, no doubt had Taliban or sympathizers, to fill out paperwork articulating how they helped Canada during the war against the Taliban so that they could eventually get their immigration approved and get on those planes. The one thing that I was shocked and appalled by were the conflicting details given to the interpreters and their families. One was medical screenings that had to be done before biometrics were collected. And the directions that they were given, it made no sense at all. For example, they were told they'd fill out a special medical screening form, have it done at a German hospital prior to them being able to move on with the process. The email that I have regarding that particular thing was August 6th. The German hospital had told them 6 weeks to get in, if ever. And At that point, I intervened and asked why medical screenings were even being done at that point in time in order to carry forward with the biometrics collection and vetting. At which point, I got conflicting details from staff at the IRCC. I involved MP Michael Cooper here in Alberta to advocate on my behalf as well. And at the end of the day, the IRCC came back a few days later and said it was a mistake on their end, that these screenings were not required at a German hospital in Kabul, and that their paperwork could in fact proceed as it should have days or weeks earlier. When eventually they got through that screening process and ended up making their way on their own to Kabul for evacuation, they had little to no detail as to what was going to happen next, when the planes were leaving, and how to get on those planes. So I received quite a few emails over those days and weeks from about 13 of his family members who were moving themselves across Afghanistan, trying to navigate through Taliban checkpoints to get to Kabul. And then once in Kabul, there wasn't clear, concise direction given as to what happens next and how to get on those planes.
Stephen, I only have so much time, so I just wanted to say, were you satisfied with the help from the Canadian government to get these people out, or did you have to go elsewhere to get help to do it?
I was absolutely not satisfied with the help that we got from the Canadian government. What I ended up doing was reaching out to other people on the ground that were Afghan, that Sangin had known and that I had worked with in some capacity in my tours to assist in telling them where it was safe to navigate and across country and where not to go to the best of my ability. And that was at best not even reliable information. It was better some than none. And then the whole paperwork process that was outlined confused me as a federal employee of 28 years and a senior officer in the CAF. So I could only imagine what these Afghans were going through with their lives on the line to get this paperwork done, to get out of the war zone, having known that they helped Canada for 2 decades, and they would have targets on their heads, being again the level.
Thank you very much, Mr. Peddle. Sorry, it's over
Understood.
time. And thank you very much, Ms. Finley, for your questions. And now we will move to Ms. Demo for 6 minutes. 6 minutes, please. Yes.
Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you to our witnesses, both our witnesses, for being with us this evening. I listened to the previous panel and to this one, and I think it's important to remember Canada, our combat operations ended in 2011, and in 2014, we actually left Afghanistan. So when we were trying to get these people out of the country, we didn't have a footprint in Afghanistan. So we had to rely on other countries as we were moving forward. And we're also, the government of Canada is dealing with the Taliban in Afghanistan. So we're not dealing with a friendly government. We're dealing with the Taliban, who, as you were mentioning, targets individuals who were helpful to Canada. Our previous witnesses talked about offering services to do biometrics in country, but we don't even know, and I didn't have a chance to ask them questions, but we don't even know whether the safety and security of a company going in to do biometrics would even be guaranteed by the Taliban. It's such an unknown, and you folks know far better than I do the type of enemy that we're dealing with, who's running the government in Afghanistan. So the other thing, I think it's just tragic that we are here within a year dealing with a crisis in Afghanistan. Now we're dealing with a crisis in Ukraine. And Canadians have always been so incredibly generous in welcoming refugees into our country, whether it's Vietnamese boat people, whether it was Syrian refugees, which happened since I've been elected. But I think we need to be careful when we're comparing Ukraine to Afghanistan, because Ukrainians can actually leave their country. Ukrainians can go to countries like Poland and have their biometrics done there. Whereas my understanding is that Pakistan now requires exit visas. So in the past, they would accept a letter from the government of Canada saying, yes, this person was an interpreter. We will gladly bring them into Pakistan, and then you can have them come to your country. So I think we need to be really careful. I'm not saying one crisis is better than the other, because both are absolutely horrific what is happening, but we need to be careful that we're looking at how we can get folks who are still in Afghanistan into Canada, given the very serious constraints that we're faced with a hostile government in power, with the inability to get those people to a friendly third country like we're seeing in Ukraine. Mr. Peddle, you've worked with True Patriot Love, I believe, to bring people into Canada, and I think, we need to look moving forward. And I'm wondering, the people you've brought into Canada, are we providing supports for them that they need once they've settled here? We want to bring them in, but we also want to make sure that they've got mental health supports, for example. Have they got what they need once they've settled in Canada? And if not, are there things that we could be doing better to make sure that they can adjust to our country?
Thank you. Mr. Paddle, go ahead, please.
Yes, I've had lengthy conversations with Sanguine and his family members specifically, and there are very good supports in place once they get to Canada, both financial funding until they get themselves situated, housing, some education, and but often it ends up being more of an individual basis for long-term success. I know it's who in Canada helps bridge the gap between that first year in Canada when they're getting situated and then getting them moving in the right direction to contributing to Canada as working society with language skills and education. In my particular case with the folks I've helped, I was very fortunate because Sanguine he's an electrician by trade and owns a successful commercial electrician company. So he's been helping Afghans that come into the Toronto area with various work sites and projects. But I think what my biggest concern.
Sorry, is he getting support from the government of Canada to do that, or is he doing that on his own?
He is doing that on his own as a proud new Canadian and loyal to his people of Afghanistan. And he has done a lot of very good work. He's been featured on many news articles and interviews on TV. But I think he's an exception to the rule. I wouldn't think or say that that's the case with most refugees that come over. It's a little bit more challenging if they don't know people that are willing to go that extra distance after they arrive.
Right, because the government assists refugees for a year. Was he privately sponsored, or was that a government-sponsored refugee?
So when Sanguine came over, he was a combat interpreter. He had interpreted for Canada for 6 years in theater, and he came over in 2012 under that special interpreter program.
Yeah.
And he was fortunate enough that he spoke impeccable English when he came to Canada because he was an interpreter.
So, and we expanded that program, right?
Thank you very much, Madam.
So family members. Okay, sorry, Chair. Thank you.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. Thank you.
I have to be right on that. Okay, thank you kindly. And now we will move to Mr. Brunel Desapp for 6 minutes, please. Go ahead.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. I'd like to thank the witnesses for being here today. I'd like to thank them for their service. And you'll have more speaking time with me than with the previous questioner, I'd just like to point out right off the bat. But I'm not going to get into politics here. That was my first comment. Second comment, I have a question for you. We talked about mental health. And there's one thing that's important to my mind that we're not talking about enough in this committee, and that is veterans. that gave their word to their Afghan collaborators, Canadian veterans. How do they feel in the midst of this situation? How do they come to grips with it? They gave their word to their Afghan friends and now they can't help them. Doesn't that create anxiety, trauma? Are they suffering from mental health issues? I'll hand the floor to you. You're better positioned than I am to speak to this issue.
Allez-y à tour de rôle.
Anyone who wishes to start first or in order, if you would like.
Mr. Petal, go ahead, please, if you're ready.
Désolé, mon français, ce n'est pas bon.
I'm sorry, my French isn't good.
Set. What was the question? Sorry.
Yeah, same here.
And my apologies.
Yeah, same here. I didn't get translation.
On va recommencer, monsieur.
We'll start again then, Mr. Chairperson, if we can just fix that.
I will do is I'll restart Mr. Bruno Duceppe as long as the same question asked. Can you see, Madam Clerk, could you check if the translation is working?
Testing 1, 2, 3. This is the English channel. Testing, 1, 2, 3.
Okay, I think it's working now, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Petal, can you hear?
I can hear perfectly right now. Thank you.
Okay. And Mr. Shelton,
yeah, I can hear you, but I did not get a translation.
Si je vous parle en français, est-ce que...
Can you hear me now? Testing 1, 2, 3. Can you hear the interpretation? Can you hear the simultaneous interpretation? Testing, 1, 2, 3. Listen, I speak English too, but given the technical information and given the fact that I am on a Bloc Québécois member, we do need simultaneous interpretation, Mr. Chairperson.
And I do agree, and I certainly would love to provide. So, Madam Clerk, I would like to get it fixed if we can.
If I may, Mr. Chair, can I just check with the witnesses if they've selected the with the little globe at the bottom, the French interpretation button?
It should say English. On the right-hand side.
I have it now.
Do you have it now? Okay,
yes.
Sorry, and that's good. And how about you, Mr. Petal? On the right-hand bottom corner, you see a raise hand, and onto the right there is a button there. If you click that button, you have the option either to put it on off, English or French. So you should be on English, please.
Okay. I think the issue, Mr. Chair, is I'm working off an iPad, so I don't think it's going to be the
on
same
the
as
iPad. You should find some interpretation. Yes.
Yes. So we go French, English. There we go. Okay. Let's try that.
Mr. Bruno Duceppe, I will restart your time again. Okay.
J'espère bien, monsieur.
Well, I certainly hope so, Mr. Chairperson. I know you're a fair person. Now, can you hear the interpretation, gentlemen? You can? Fantastic. Fabulous. I'll start from the beginning again. What I was going to say was I was going to give you more speaking time than the person that came before me. I'll be quick with my questions. Now, the issue of mental health has been raised, but it's something that hasn't been raised sufficiently, and that is the mental health of our veterans. How do our Canadian veterans feel when they gave their word to their Afghan collaborators, and yet now they're faced with the fact that it's either difficult or impossible to help them? These veterans served in Afghanistan. They want to help their Afghan collaborators, and yet they're incapable to do so. Does that create anxiety, trauma even? What's your opinion? Your best place to speak to this, Mr. Petal, and then the other witness, please.
Go ahead, Mr. Petal.
There is absolutely a correlation between us abandoning our Afghan allies and it becoming what we would term possibly as a moral injury. And it's my understanding that many veterans like myself, and I can speak for myself for sure, have suffered greatly watching Afghanistan tear itself apart, watching us leave the folks behind that helped us while we were there and protected us while we were there. And it took a toll on myself, and I've got other veteran friends that, quite frankly, their PTSD conditions are partially fed or aggravated by the fact that we have abandoned our allies, our comrades in arms, our brothers that we were standing shoulder to shoulder with during combat operations. It's not something that is easy to work past. And I think that many veterans like myself are still struggling to this day, knowing that there's people who we know that helped us are still over in Afghanistan being pursued by the Taliban for the work that they did in protecting us when we were there.
Shalshin, go ahead, please.
I won't go on any further about the veteran mental health cause because I think Mr. Peddle did a great job responding, and I agree. What I will do is speak to the mental health crisis that I believe there is within the IRCC. For the folks within the IRCC that were answering the phones and answering the emails. As the veteran community, we built strong relationships with those folks inside the IRCC, and I believe that this government has let them down. Those folks were dealing with people calling, no different than somebody calling 911, basically saying, "Save me, I'm going to die," and having. You got to remember, most of these folks who left Service Canada, CRA to come over to IRCC for the purpose of answering the phones or answering emails did it because they wanted to help. They thought they could make a difference. Yet, most of these folks were working from home, communicating by Microsoft Teams, and accessing your portal through a VPN, okay? And most of these folks have still not been acknowledged for all of their hard work. Most of these folks were trying tirelessly to actually process the applications that we had submitted with a completely broken processing system. So within our government bodies, I am gravely concerned about how inefficient the application processing was. And I think those folks who were answering the phones and the emails were gravely impacted by it. I would then like to extend this one step further to the national mental health crisis that we have. Try and go book an appointment with a psychologist right now, and you will find it is going to take upwards of 4 to 6 months to find somebody, if you can even find somebody. My question for this panel is, what are all of you doing to solve the mental health crisis in this country?
C'est extrêmement intéressant ce que vous venez de nous dire.
That's extremely interesting what you've just said. It's the first time we've heard this in the committee, and the proof is in the pudding. Your testimony today is crucial. Very quickly, I asked the previous panel what their top priority was in terms of our report's priorities, the report we're going to draft, and they said suspending technical formalities, forms to fill out on the internet when these folks are perhaps at risk of dying, sponsorship from Canada, and a diplomatic presence on the ground to help Afghans come to Canada. Would you agree with those priorities? And if there were one priority, what would it be? Very quickly, please, because I think our time is running out.
I think some of this work could have been done third location outside of Afghanistan, like a triage. Some of the necessary steps to bring them to Canada could have been completed not in the war zone, and that could have made things far more easy on everyone at the end of August when things went sideways and people were trying to get on those last flights out of Kabul.
Mr. Shelton, you have something to say?
Yeah, I think my number one priority is much greater than this. It's about the members of parliament that represent all of the citizens of Canada to start working better together. I actually find it embarrassing watching everybody on TV. Okay, the rhetoric going back and forth across the House of Commons is embarrassing. We deserve better as citizens. The members of parliament should have been sitting down at a table coming to a solution to this problem instead of yelling back and forth across the House of Commons and just assuming that our bureaucratic departments would figure this out.
Thank you, Mr. Shelton. And thank you, Mr. Bruno.
I agree with you, sir. I agree with you wholeheartedly.
Now we will go to Ms. Kwan for 6 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for your service and for your presentations today. I think your presentations were particularly important to find out what happened, what went wrong, and of course for government to learn from those errors. Now, going forward, one of the critical issues is still in getting people out. From our last panel, we heard that 52% of the people who sent an email to which the government asked them to send an email to have not even had a response. I have spent sent numerous spreadsheets of individuals in urgent situations to the government, and I rarely get a response. So from that perspective, what do you think, or what is your recommendation to the government to address this critical crisis for the people who've been left behind, and for them to know that help can be and should be on its way, and what should the government do to materialize that? So I'll start with Mr. Peddle, and then I'll go to Mr. Shelson.
Mr. Peddle, go ahead, please.
If this is potentially a manpower issue, then this is a great opportunity for the government of Canada to create more jobs for Canadians and put them to work on these phones or processing this paperwork. Potentially some of these new Canadians that have come over from Afghanistan that speak English because they were interpreters and speak flawless Dari or Pashto could be employed gainfully to help their brothers and sisters in Afghanistan come to Canada. I see this as a great opportunity to employ more Canadians in a meaningful capacity that will get these Afghans out, and going forward in the future with Ukraine, the same thing.
Mr. Shelton, go ahead, please.
I think one of the biggest issues here has nothing to do with manpower. I believe it has to do with our outdated IT system that the government of Canada operates upon. During my time working on this, I learned a ton about how these applications actually got processed inside the IRCC. Something that every Canadian and every Afghan should know is that portal that you fill out online, it actually just generates an automated email that some human has to answer. Okay, and that portal only actually started working in close to Christmas time. There are two different databases that these applicants, their data was going into. One of which the people answering the phone and answering the emails don't even have access to. I personally sent 15 different applications from 15 unique email addresses. I had somebody within the IRCC who was quite supportive, who then looked up every single one of my emails. Guess how many they could find? One. Where did all my emails go? Why can't our government workers access this information? I think there needs to be an investigation into the databases that are being used by the Canadian government. Where's all of this information? Where's all the data? Why are none of the emails being actually opened and answered? Are they just going? Oh, also, several of my emails were in spam. You're using Outlook and emails are going into spam. Could you imagine being in Afghanistan stranded and your email that you send in goes to spam? How is that possible?
Thank you.
Madam Kwan, go ahead, please.
Thank you. One of the issues that the previous panels have raised is the fact that biometrics are required. It is impossible for people to get it right now. And boots on the ground would be NGOs on the ground, people who would be able to do that work, and for the government to also waive the biometrics from that perspective. So I'd like to get your view on that proposal, waiving the biometrics and getting NGOs and people on the ground, possibly former military personnel and others on the ground to help with this work. Mr. Peddle?
Being a previous intelligence officer, I've worked extensively with biometrics and policies surrounding them. And I do think that in this particular case, we're talking today where we're not in Afghanistan, obviously, potentially moving them outside of the country to do biometrics. And if things don't screen positively, then we can always send them back potentially. that could be one option if the Taliban are allowing people to leave the country, which they say is the case. I'm sure that there's a lot of complications with doing so. But other than that, maybe, like you said, temporarily waiving biometrics. And then there's a time and a place to do it elsewhere before we integrate them in the Canadian society.
A retired military panelist also suggested that perhaps even for people to come to Canada, waive all those requirements for them to come to Canada, and then go through the process once they're in Canada. And if it doesn't pass muster, then you have a resolution to deal with that to return the individual. Is that an option?
20 seconds,
I believe it
please,
is.
Pedal.
This isn't the first time we've done it. Kosovo refugees. We bring them to Canada, we put them in a secure place where until they're properly vetted, they're under watch. And once they're vetted, then we integrate them into the rest of society. If they don't check out, then we have other mechanisms in place to send them back.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kwan. Just right on the dot, 6 minutes. Thank you very much. To the second round, Mr. Rapp, 4 minutes, please.
Thanks, Chair. And first off, thanks to both the witnesses for coming to testify and for your service. Please keep your answers as quickly to the point as possible. So we got 4 minutes. My first question to you, Mr. Peddle, as your former intelligence officer and obviously tracking this, is just to go back to how this was quite not preventable, but forecasted. We saw all the signs coming and that we could have taken, in your opinion, could we have taken more action sooner by the Canadian government to help get Afghans out sooner?
Absolutely. The moment that President Donald Trump announced to the world that America was leaving Afghanistan, I think anyone that was in Afghanistan knew the writing was on the wall as to what was going to happen. The question was when. Then President Biden gave a date. I think there were lots of opportunities long before July or August of 2021 to bring all the Afghans that helped us, who we had records of, over to Canada. There is no excuse whatsoever for us to have waited until August of 2021 when we knew that Afghanistan was folding. There's no excuse whatsoever that we waited that long.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Peddle. For you, Mr. Shelson, can you explain, I know you were working the ground very early in the evac process, what you were hearing from those people on the ground, those Afghans, and what they were hearing from GAC and from the Canadian government en route to the airport? Could you just expand on some of the challenges of what they were hearing?
Mr. Shelson.
Yeah, so it was quite chaotic trying to get folks into the airport. And so the way it worked is there was a gate that would open and people could move into the airport and then they would close the gate, right? It's simple, basically that. But we didn't really find out about that until afterwards. What the folks were being told was come to any gate and wait. But the Canadian forces were primarily manning one gate, Barron Gate. Okay, that was quite well known once we got to the aftermath of this. People were being told. So picture yourself. I don't know if anybody has kids here. You got a few young kids, your wife, a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 4-year-old, and you get a call at 4 o'clock in the morning to pack up your family and get to the airport because your plane to Canada is coming. You grab your kids, you throw them in a taxi, you get all the way to the airport, and you wait. And you wait, and you wait. You have to remember, all of these folks had cell phones. They all had phone numbers. We were communicating with them. Why couldn't the Canadian government find out a way to communicate with these folks on a one-to-one basis? Why weren't we enabling the Canadian forces on the inside of the airport to communicate with these folks on a one-to-one basis? And if we knew that we weren't going to go to all the gates, why were we telling them to do that? We were just putting them at risk.
So, look, I'd like you to expand on that a little bit. Why was that occurring? Was it a lack of coordination amongst the different departments, the lack of one sort of minister department in charge? And as well, like there's been rumors and stuff, and I don't know if you have any firsthand knowledge. Was there any sort of, I don't want to, maybe interference in the prioritization of who was getting out on certain flights?
Well, IRCC was the department that the applications would go through. My understanding, and they were the ones that were calling people to the airport by email. Then the Canadian forces were, my understanding, were manning the gates, and GAC had to basically approve the people that would get inside. And so you had 3 different departments that weren't all talking to each other. We had folks that were getting called to the airport, but when they would get there, their visa only had some of the names of the people, and therefore GAC wouldn't let them in. So you've got IRCC not talking to GAC, CAF being told, I spoke with several MPs, including Mr. Mendocino, who told me that Canadian Armed Forces on the ground would have discretion at the gate. That never occurred. If your name wasn't on a GAC list, you did not get through the gate. Furthermore, I do think there should be an investigation into prioritization of non-Canadian nationals by the Canadian Armed Forces. I have heard that rumor.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Rapp. We will go to Mr. Dong for 4 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Can you hear me, Chair? Yeah. Before I begin, I just want to address a point my honorable bloc colleague brought up earlier. I think, my experience at this committee is that how members of the committee choose to use their time, whether to preamble the questions or ask the questions directly, is entirely up to that member according to standing order. So I would like, I'm always respectful to my colleagues and to witnesses. But just for the record and for the benefit of the viewers, I just want to point this out. And I think the MP Demoff actually made a few good points in her preamble, and one of them is looking forward, because that's what this committee, I think it's a very important part of this study, is looking forward, what kind of positive changes we can bring to the system. And I want to thank the 2 gentlemen, witness panel tonight for their service and for their time, actually share some of their views and their experience in evacuating Afghan people who helped Canadians. So I want to ask Captain Shelton, you mentioned earlier on that there is quite a bit of bureaucracy you think that's in the system could be improved. So going forward, do you have anything, can you elaborate a little bit on this? Do you have any specific suggestions on how government can make our public service more flexible, I guess, or more ready going forward?
Mr. Shelton.
Well, I guess what's the incentive would be my question. What type of incentives are we currently putting in place inside of our government departments to incentivize people to be more efficient? And let me answer my question,
sure.
Please, Mr. Dong.
One person at a time, please.
Sorry about that.
I do find it interesting that Ms. Demoff and Mr. Dong had a quite large preamble at the beginning. I did not even get to speak to Ms. Demoff.
Mr. Sheldon, you don't.
Floor is yours.
I don't need to make.
Mr. Sheldon, the floor is yours. Go ahead.
Comments. Just answer the question, please.
So how do we improve it? There has to be incentives within our government departments to improve it. And right now, what I observed within the IRCC during the application process is you have very little accountability between different levels of management within government bodies. IRCC representatives that we're spoken to couldn't even get answers from their bosses. It would take a week to get an answer about what to do with a specific application, and it wasn't. And it was all being done remotely through Microsoft Teams. Again, if this was a private business, we would be out of business.
Could that be because of the COVID situation that they're working from home, or? I mean,
absolutely,
you did give credit to the public service. And I too agree.
Say again.
You give credit to the public service and frontline workers, and I too very much, shown numerous times shown my appreciation for their work during COVID. Yeah. It has been very difficult. Some of them work 16-hour days to get the work done. But I will take your point back because I'm also on the public accounts. You also mentioned, I think, in public that you've seen the Canadians, so in your view, Canadian soldiers were not given enough flexibility or latitude as as their colleagues from some other country. Can you talk about what kind of flexibility that you meant in those interviews?
Mr. Dong, thank you. Your time is up, and now I'm going to go to Mr. Brunner. Just have 2 minutes, please. Go ahead.
But it was good.
Merci beaucoup. Moi, tantôt, j'ai juste.
Thank you very much. earlier I said I'd give more time to the witnesses. I didn't say that was a better approach or a worse approach. That was just your take on the matter. Now, very quickly, since we don't have much time, Mr. Shelson, earlier I asked you what the top priority was, and you said that members stop saying silly things in the House of Commons and grandstanding. I'm someone who's very transparent, and I work for Quebecers, and I'm looking to find what your top priority is on the ground to help our Afghan friends. What would that be?
Well, the folks are still there. Their folks are still there. Their applications still need to be processed. And I can tell you for a matter of fact that most of them are backlogged. I don't know where the backlog is. I can't see into that. I would ask on this committee to figure out where that backlog is and get it taken care of so that these applications start moving through. We moved 2 individuals to Qatar about 12 weeks ago. We have not been able to move anybody since. Everything is completely ground to a halt.
Merci. Monsieur Peddle, rapidement.
Mr. Peddle, quickly, your top priority on the ground right now.
Mr. Peddle, go ahead.
Get them out on civilian flights if the Taliban will let them leave, and then go through the process of integration, third location or here in Canada, under controlled circumstances.
Et selon vous, est-ce qu'on va y arriver?
And your opinion, will be able to achieve the 40,000 refugees as the government promised by next year?
Si on continue de la façon.
If we continue along the same road?
Mr. Peddle, go ahead.
Right now, I would say no. I think the number of folks we've gotten out since the 1st of September has been abysmal, and I do not believe for a moment that we're going to achieve those numbers unless we change things up.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brunel.
Merci beaucoup à nos deux témoins. Merci.
Thank you to both witnesses.
For 2 minutes, please go ahead.
Mr. Shelson, you didn't get a chance, or I didn't get a chance to ask you or get your response on the question around biometrics. Do you mind answering that question now, please?
Yeah,
Mr. Shelson, go ahead, please.
Do it in a third-party country. It's already happening. But have a plan if those folks don't pass, because you're going to have a real hard time dropping them back off in Afghanistan.
So how do people get to a third country? Because that's also the other problem as well.
Chartered air flights right out of the Kabul airport. We're doing it.
Should the Canadian government engage NGOs on the ground there to help with that work?
Absolutely.
Because I think there's severe limitations with respect to that at this moment as well. You raise many concerns in terms of what's happened, and some of them you've cited at this committee. We don't have time to sort of get all the examples of where things went wrong. Would you be able to submit to this committee a documentation outlining that? Because I think part of the issue here is this: in order to move forward, we also have to know what happened in the past. And that's how you learn from mistakes. That's how I've been taught anyway. Is that something that you'll be able to do for our committee?
I'll consider it. Go ahead. I will consider it, yes.
Madam
Thank you. Thank you. My last question then for Mr. Peddle, I think I'm going to run out of time very quickly. For Mr. Peddle, in terms of government actions with respect to the backlog, one of the issues that we've learned is that with the Ukraine crisis right now, the government's not putting additional resources into addressing that issue. That means IRCC is using the same resources we currently have. Do you think that's going to be a problem?
Yes, just like in warfare, we can surge, we can reallocate resources to get a robust response in a limited amount of time, even if we're not capable of sustaining that over the long term. I don't understand why we can't do that in other government departments as well.
Thank you very much. And I want to thank both the witnesses, Mr. Peddle and Mr. Shelson, on behalf of the committee members for being here today and with the information that's very pertinent to our committee report and study. Thank you. All the best. I'm suspending the meeting for a few minutes before we get to the next panel.
Thank you.
Order. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of November 25, 2021. Should any technical challenges arise, please advise me, as we may need to suspend a few minutes to ensure all members are able to participate fully. Witnesses should be aware that translation is available through the globe icon at the bottom of their screen. So please select whether you want French, English, or off, because we will be doing the simultaneous in both official languages. With this, now I would like to welcome our guests here on behalf of the committee members. First, I would love to welcome Political Science Professor, Concordia University, Mr. Julian Spencer Churchill. And from the Vector Global Solutions, we have Miss Brandy Hansen. From Women Leaders of Tomorrow, we have Miss Priba Razai. Welcome. And now I will give each and every one of you, all three of you, an opportunity to speak for 5 minutes. Please be on time because we need the members to ask questions. So 5 minutes. Let me start with the Professor Julian Spencer Churchill for 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Je remercie le député, monsieur.
I'd like to thank the member, Mr. Brunel Duceppe, and members of the committee for having invited me to discuss this issue. I'm a professor at Concordia University, and since 1998, I've never gone to Afghanistan, but I've conducted research in Pakistan and on Pakistan for a decade. From 1997 to 2011. I interviewed about 100 servicemen and women, intelligence officers, politicians. I visited all the Pakistan provinces except one. Over the past 25 years, with my Western and Pakistan colleagues, we were struck by the unlikelihood of NATO success in Afghanistan. Let me elaborate. We have published our points of view on a number of occasions. The recommendations were systematically ignored. My three key points. Economic development in Afghanistan relies on Pakistan, which is a guardian of Afghan exports to India and abroad. They don't have an infrastructure for a viable market. The Pakistanis have put in ad hoc measures since a number of agreements were entered into. Second point, the Afghan community has, in terms of humanitarian aid, has continually tried to marginalize assistance as part of an unrealistic and unmanageable effort to make Afghanistan independent from Pakistan. Third, there was the Soviet invasion in 1987, which is false. It was all the perpetrators that conducted it. The Soviet Union invaded to consolidate a regime. The interpreter regrets that the quality of sound is inadequate for the purposes of interpretation. We'll have to suspend service.
La frontière afghano-pakistanaise, délimitée par la ligne McMahon, n'est toujours pas reconnue par Kaboul. En 1948, le ministre afghan de la Défense.
I would like to suspend the meeting for a few seconds. Let me check the translation. Mr. Spence Churchill go ahead for 2 more minutes, please.
Pas 3?
Do I not have 3 minutes? So let me explain why. The Afghan-Pakistan border has still not been recognized by Kabul, and the minister at the time declared his support at the time, which led to a border conflict with Pakistan which persisted. 1 battalion was lost by Pakistan in a number of years. Afghan trade was disturbed, and in 1973, the effects of a blockage, there was a 10-year period which was the culmination of the Afghan and Pakistan issues. There was trade over that period, and there were weapons that were provided. Unfortunately, the interpreter still does not have the speech. We have to suspend momentarily, please.
En 1973, le sous-mentionné Daoud Mohamed...
Meeting is suspended for a few seconds.
So during this time, Afghanistan shifted its economic activities and demands for foreign aid to the Soviet Union. And today, in return for allowing transit trade between Afghan and India, a free trade agreement gives Pakistan limited access to the markets of the United States and the European Union. Even so, Pakistan has a stranglehold on Afghanistan's supply of construction materials purchased with funds Kabul receives from abroad, and it dominates sectors of the Afghan economy, such as the carpet weaving industry. If the government of Afghanistan's cause is lost, it may still be possible to salvage some of the foreign aid projects in the region. In any case, all kinds of nation-building campaigns around the world could benefit from the lessons learned from this disaster. The fall of the Kabul region, despite the scale of aid spending, shows, first of all, that the signatories of the 2005 Paris Declaration were badly mistaken in attributing the problem to an imbalance between donors and recipients, rather than to collusion. It also shows that it is unwise to allow armed forces to give preference to social reform projects that are welcome in the West but provocative to the local population. Social reforms can have strategic benefits, but in some circumstances, especially those of a weak government in Kabul, they can also prohibitively be expensive or impossible to achieve. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Chair, you're on mute.
Thank you, Mr. Spencer Churchill. Now we'll go to Ms. Hanson for 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and honorable members for allowing me to come and speak with you this evening. My name is Brandy Hanson. I'm a director for Vector Global Solutions in Canada. We're a nonprofit organization. I'm also the director of operations for ArcSalus out of the United States. We are a group of Canadians and Americans who we're mostly comprised of pilots, active duty. Sorry, I just have some notes here. I just bypassed. Active duty, intelligence sector, individuals, analysts, business administration, government liaison. We were in Afghanistan in August and rescued over 1,000 Afghans prior to the gates falling in Kabul. So we do have a proof of concept for evacuations. We also rescued 53 Special Mission Wing individuals out of Uzbekistan with the cooperation of the Uzbekistan president. They're now relocated and resettled in the United States. Our mission is global crisis response to not just Afghanistan, but on an international level. We specialize in airlift. Our airlift has a NATO cage code with an extensive past history of performance. We can land and depart in any country in the world. The charter is small. It is 180. It is not a commercial charter. We only evacuate except individuals with accepted onward travel with a clear travel path. We do have a ground team. We have a logistics team with an extensive database. We have an intelligence team, a food program in Afghanistan. And we also have resettlement as well as a biometric team. Our focus is primarily on all categories: orphans and unaccompanied minors, women, widows, targeted groups, vulnerable minorities, endearing relations, individuals who have endearing relations to the Canadian and US government, diplomatic missions. We presently have a very large diplomatic mission with almost the entire Afghan cabinet within our care at the moment. We do also, we evacuate frontline, humanitarian defenders. We have a CONOP catalog. CONOP are concepts of operations or missions for Canada just alone. Our objective is to identify all obstacles and come to tangible resolutions moving forward. I'm hoping to spend my time speaking with respect to the future and what we're going to be doing moving forward. From my understanding, our objectives are biometrics, undocumented individuals, routes, airlift, intermediary countries, and funding. At this moment, we're able to offer airlift, 2 flights a week, 180 individuals with onward travel, which means this would be perhaps the individuals who have an enduring relationship with the Canadian government who have accepted who already have accepted applications through the IRCC. Mr. Speaker, please let me know if I go over my time. I have my head down in my notes.
You have 1.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. My recommendations for resolutions would be biometrics via a contractor or subcontractor, perhaps not an NGO that's doing the evacuations, but a third party, either inside Afghanistan or perhaps on a cruise ship at the port of Karachi in Pakistan, working as facilitating a floating humanitarian hub where you can do biometrics, and then possibly the law changes also when you're on international maritime waters, which could then sail to Canada as well, which would be economical. I would recommend implementing similar immigration measures to the Ukraine or new innovative ones, as what we've been doing hasn't been overly successful. The one successful IRCC measure was the Canadian and U.S. cooperation on the safe passage to Canada for the 5,000 individuals, refugees who were evacuated and facilitated by the USA. That has been a success. It would be my recommendation for the IRCC to gain another partnership with the U.S. Department of State to perhaps do another 5,000 or 10,000, since that was a successful measure. Airlift transportation is something that is accessible to Canada through us with our NATO cage code, DUNS number, and extensive past history. Rather than moving 200 to 300 per a month, we are able to move 360 per a week according to our flight plan. That's 360 individuals a week, 1,440 per month, 17,000 per year.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hansen. Perfect timing.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And we will go to now from the Women Leaders of Tomorrow, Ms. Fariba Razai, for 5 minutes, please. Go ahead.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to appear and speak before the Special Committee on Afghanistan today. My name is Fariba Razai. I was born and raised in Afghanistan. I'm one of the first Afghan...
Hold on.
On a point of order, Mr. Chairperson, for occupational and health reasons, for our interpreters who are working so hard lately, it's impossible to interpret this witness, I'm afraid.
Hold on. Then I'm going to stand for 2 seconds here again. figure it out in how we can manage. I'm sorry, Ms. Rajai. We did not mean to be this way, but we just want to make sure that the other two witnesses we are able to at least have the questions for. Is everyone, all the members in unanimous? I need a unanimous consent from the members. Are the members in agreement? Madam Kwan? Yes. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
I have changed my headsets if it works. I wear a better one. Does it work now?
Can we just have a few more words, please?
Yes, so I changed my headsets. I wore a much better headset. It's a $200 headset. No?
I don't know.
All right. Okay, please go ahead.
Okay, so Madam Clerk, we can go ahead with the meeting then? Okay, because we have the unanimous consent from the committee members to deal it at some point in time. Go to the members and we can start with the first round. Mr. Hallen for 5 minutes, please go ahead.
I think, Chair, I'm going to replace Mr. Hallen. He's involved in another event as well. So if you're good with that, Chair. Yep, super. All right. So I guess, I'll just, I guess, give my own personal attestation to the professor's comments, having spent a year and a half almost of my life or more in Afghanistan. I can speak to the complexity of the issue with Pakistan and Afghanistan. And I guess my question to him, to the professor would be, is based on that, does it not underline the importance of why we should have tried to get as many Afghans out of the country before the country fell to the Taliban?
Yeah, no, I don't mean to challenge the current policy of evacuating Afghans who cooperated with the Canadian forces. My point that I've echoed for 20 years is that the policies before that disaster happened consistently avoided Pakistan. And for those of us working in Pakistan, it was just, it looked like it was policy driven. And, I've been to many conferences once where I've raised the issue and not been reinvited. So I could only assume there's some sort of conspiracy. My interpretation is in the military side, the Canadian forces largely deferred to their American counterparts, who held a pretty strong line on not including Pakistan for a variety of reasons. And for the aid community, I just assumed they didn't want to complicate the process, and they were, as long as they were being subsidized by, Canadian government help, then they were satisfied with not having to address the Pakistan issue. But certainly efforts to help those in Afghanistan now, are not affected by whatever Pakistan thinks. Thank you for the question.
All right, Mr. Spencer Churchill, can you bring your mic maybe a bit closer to your lips? Great, thank you. Right, go ahead, thanks. Mr. Ruff.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. My next question will be to Ms. Hansen, is just to can you further elaborate just the importance, and I guess maybe on your own understanding, it's too bad the other witness couldn't testify, because one of the main concerns I have is around the women, children, those visible minorities that are being persecuted under the Taliban, and the importance of getting these refugees or these Afghans out of Afghanistan. One of the concerns I have under our current sort of philosophy is I'm worried we're going to fill up the numbers that the government's committed out of people that are already safely got out of Afghanistan. There may be still in another third country that isn't perfect, but my real concern is over those in Afghanistan.
Go ahead, Ms. Hansen.
Thank you, Honorable Member. My response is, at this time, to be entirely candid, I don't believe we even, with what we do, we don't have a clear path as to how to get out. I think that the humanitarian and the vulnerable individuals and the people at risk are some of the most difficult at this time to be getting out of Afghanistan. A lot of them don't have documents. They don't have an endearing relationship with the Canadian government. And the agreement that Canada has with the United States with respect to individuals being evacuated, like creating a path with the Department of State writing those referrals, would certainly be something that I could see as a tangible resolution. Not just saying, I'm aware, my understanding is that not all of these individuals have gone through Department of State to like right away. They aren't in the US, and the US aren't just sending them to Canada. These are individuals that they're still getting their families out of Afghanistan. They're individuals over in, say, Turkey or intermediary countries, aka lily pad countries. And so it's not that it's just for people who are at some sort of intermediary country and they might be safe for the moment. I believe that it's this 5,000 agreement, which is almost full, I believe it is full at this time, was specific to humanitarian and vulnerable individuals and targeted groups and minorities. This is, I believe, the best ticket for them to get out of Afghanistan. Perhaps we can hardwire it to make it more geared to getting individuals out from Afghanistan right now, rather than pulling them from intermediary countries. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Raff. I appreciate that. And now we will, Madam Jahid, for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair, and I will be splitting my time with MP Sidhu. I wanted to ask a question to Ms. Razai. So I will just ask her for some information. So if she can send us some written submission on that, that would be really great. So she has been a passionate advocate of women and girls' education as well as gender equality. So I just would like to have her input that what can Canada do to make sure that the girls in Afghanistan have the access to education and other humanitarian aid. So if she can't, because of interpretation issues, if she can send us some information on that through like a written submission, that would be great. My next question is for...
Hold on.
Professor...
Is the other members okay with this? Written submission? Madam Kwan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for clarification, is it the intention of the committee to invite Ms. Razai back at another time? Because that's what I understood, that's what we were going to do.
We can try, Madam Kwan, but if it's acceptable, if we can ask the question if she can do a written submission. If you're okay with that, I think that will be a perfect for now, because if we find a spot, then we can bring in, otherwise we are fully loaded.
So are you saying that if she sends written submissions, she would not be invited back?
No, but I mean, if we have a chance, we will. But if we couldn't find a chance, then we won't, right? If that's okay with you.
Well, actually, it's not. I would like to have her back because she's a witness that I would really like to hear from.
No, okay. Okay, Madam Kwan, thank you.
Okay, so like my request was that if she can get the information. My next question is for Mr. Spencer Churchill. I would like to ask him that if he can explain what role Pakistan is playing in the help to get the Afghans out of the Afghanistan and in regards to their resettlement to the other countries, and going forward, what would be his recommendations, that what role can Canada play to evacuate Afghans, and especially many Afghans don't have their passports valid. So what role can Canada play in order to get them out of Afghanistan, and how the neighboring countries can help in those efforts?
Thank you. I have no specific information on the refugees. My background is obviously looking at the larger picture. I think Pakistan would be very amenable to helping Canada if Canada were to engage Pakistan, obviously with a price tag for development. Pakistan's influence in Afghanistan is frequently exaggerated. But if it's tied to aid, and Canada's had a very good experience at all levels of providing aid in Pakistan, and Pakistan is very likely to provide what Canada needs with the Taliban. Obviously, it means Canada will have to engage with the Taliban government and give them legitimacy. I don't have, unfortunately, more detail than that. Thank you for the question.
How much time do you have left? Thank you for that. And Mr. Chair, how much time do I have left?
2.5 minutes.
Okay. Well, I'll go to Mr. Spencer really quickly to elaborate on my colleague's question. So, Mr. Spencer, you mentioned you did a lot of research in Pakistan and in the region. Would you be able to provide some insights into how Pakistan or neighboring countries can play a wider role in assisting our evacuation efforts? I know you can't really, you said nothing specific in terms of refugees, but in terms of neighboring countries with your research in the region.
Well, Pakistan, as I mentioned in my comments, is a very, very narrow objective, which the foreign aid community has given Afghanistan consistent assistance in avoiding addressing the main issue, which is recognition of the frontier. If anyone were to deliver that to Pakistan, simply by opening a dialogue with Afghans who have resisted this one policy request from Pakistan for a very long time, then Pakistan is, very likely to normalize their relationship with Afghanistan and be a very cooperative conduit. The main problem with Afghanistan in the West is that it's perceived to be a religiously intense country where you've got Takfiri political interests, but no religious party has ever received more than 5% of the vote at the federal level. And not in the current parliament, but in the previous legislature, about 20% of the legislators had dual citizenship with the US, Canada, and the UK. So the body politic there is quite sympathetic with liberal values. Obviously, they're in a difficult spot for strategic reasons, but Pakistan is far easier to engage with than is frequently portrayed.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to go to Mr. Bruno Desep for 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Merci.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all of our witnesses. Unfortunately, we did lose one witness. Being here this evening is very important. I know it is getting late, and I don't want you to blame our technicians or interpreters. It's not their fault. They work very hard, and we should take our hats off to them. Mr. Spencer Churchill, I had an opportunity to read the document you sent through to the committee. Now, you really spare no one, and you didn't mince words, did you? Should Canada work more seriously alongside Pakistan in terms of its relations with Afghanistan? Is that essentially what you're telling us tonight? Response: yes, indeed. You've hit the nail on the head, and it's a pity that we were in Afghanistan for 14 years without entering into an agreement with Pakistan. The big problem has been our development strategy from the outset. It just didn't make sense right out of the gate. Now, the challenge of evacuating Afghans and reinstituting development efforts in Afghanistan, well, that is still possible. I have a lot more experience when it comes to Pakistan, as I said. But under the former CEDA, well, we had access to even villages in the nation. That's not the problem. There's a reluctancy to engage directly with the Pakistan government. I interviewed the 6 high commissioners of Pakistan who are all of the same opinion as me. There is a cultural barrier in North America in terms of engagement with Pakistan. Question: well, it's important what you're saying tonight. There are a number of witnesses that appeared before us that said the Canadian presence on the ground in Pakistan would be beneficial and would simplify the arrival of refugees. So what are the obstacles and what are the benefits of having heightened diplomatic presence there? on the ground? What would be the pros and cons? Well, the benefits of being there in Pakistan and Afghanistan? Well, yes, both. You referred to cultural issues, but what are the other obstacles? Well, the High Commissioners mentioned a number of barriers put in place by our allies. Canada had a program where Pakistanis would be trained along our side, as they did with the French army. But because of the Americans, that program was cut off for over a decade. And the upshot of that was that in Pakistan, the army is one of the institutions that is supporting democracy. It seems counterintuitive. When there's a coup and they take over the government, well, they try and overturn the government almost immediately. It's an organization that plays an everyday role in politics because of the national defense budget is in fact affected by civilian corruption. And to address that, there needs to be a major overhaul. Our influence in Pakistan was by way of that institution, but unfortunately the program was cut, and I believe that it was renewed in 2015. So there's a bit of a schizophrenic approach in Canada. We don't seem to know what to do. We seem to be following poor advice from our allies. Question, are you saying that it's inevitable that in order to improve relationships between Afghanistan and the West, that the key role should be played by Pakistan? Response, always, always when it comes to international refugees, when it comes to intelligence, when it comes to counterterrorism, everything needs to go through Pakistan. Question, well, what would help us this evening when it comes to the humanitarian crisis? What you're saying logically is that Pakistan needs to play a central role, and currently Canada's not doing its job to facilitate that. Response, exactly. Pakistan isn't resisting our overtures. No. For example, let me give you an example. One of the High Commissioners, the third-ranking commissioner, his family lives in Oakville, Ontario. So they already have tentacles here. And the Minister of Agriculture lived in Alberta for 1 year. So there are a lot of Pakistanis already in Canada that hold important positions in Pakistan. Question, I think the chair's going to cut me off, but thank you very much for that information.
Sir Churchill.
Without further ado, we can go to Madam Kwan for 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for their presentations. I'd like to first turn to Ms. Hansen. One of the issues that we're faced with right now, of course, is that the Canadian government's refugee program for Afghanistan, for Afghans, is that you need to be in a third country. But however, many people are stuck in Afghanistan and they're not able to get to a third country. So from that perspective, what suggestions do you have so that we can help some of the people in Afghanistan to get to safety and be able to come to Canada?
Go ahead, Mr. Spencer Churchill. Oh, Hansen, sorry. Ms. Hansen.
Okay. Thank you, Honorable Chair Member. My response would be, we have a handful of intermediary countries, the third countries. An operation like that would look like landing in Kabul. There's no reason, the only thing I believe that's really holding us back from bringing people directly from Afghanistan to Canada is the biometrics. However, if we're only dealing specifically with the intermediary countries, we have Pakistan at the moment. We also have the UAE, and they have the humanitarian city there. And the UAE has agreed to take individuals from Afghanistan, if they have a flight from Afghanistan to the UAE, to their humanitarian city there. They're willing to do that if the Canadian government is willing to start assisting with some of the backlog within the humanitarian city. So at the moment, there's several individuals in Afghanistan who have onward travel to Canada. They have accepted travel. They have a clear path of travel. And that all that's standing in the way is a flight to pick them up and transport them to the UAE. Biometrics are done there. They have a consular there, a high commission, and then onward to Canada. And I believe the only thing standing in the way really is a flight, and just Canada to maybe say, okay, we'll help with the backlog. You had all of these groups that jumped in, and you had these nonprofit groups that jumped in, the evac groups. They picked people up, they dropped them off in the UAE and said bye. And so now this is why we have the backlog there. And we can use the humanitarian city. I have confirmation that we can use it. It's just a matter of maybe the IRCC says, okay, we want categories. We'll take 100 orphans, 100 unaccompanied minors, 100 doctors, whoever they want. As long as they see somebody helping them with the backlog at humanitarian city in the UAE, we are able and allowed to use the UAE as an intermediary country. How they would get there is through a nonprofit organization as ourselves, or perhaps another credible one in Canada is Aman Lara. Whoever has flights, if the government is paying for the flights, funding the flights, because the cost to run a flight is something that's very difficult to raise those kind of funds. But that's my answer is it's a matter of having the funding, picking them up in Afghanistan, transporting them to the UAE.
Thank you. And you said that you had documentations, confirmation documentations. Would you be able to share that with the committee?
I have confirmation through, there's an organization in the UAE who runs the humanitarian city, and they control most of the flights, 95, 98% of the flights that go into the UAE. I can certainly get you confirmation that the UAE is willing to take individuals to stay there as long as we are helping alleviate some of the capacity that they have in the humanitarian city. I will get that for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. In terms of third countries, so Pakistan is obviously a neighboring country, and Mr. Spencer Churchill, you had indicated that that is an option as an alternative for the Canadian government to go to by way of helping Afghan. Now, in terms of on the ground piece, Ms. Hansen, how do people, especially women who do not have a male accompanying them, get to that third country?
Thank you for your question, Honorable Chair Member. Or Honorable Member. The way they get through that is through organizations who have funding from the government or donations that can afford to go there. They pick them up on the flight, and then they transport them to the intermediary country. A lot of these individuals are signed up with nonprofit resettlement organizations or humanitarian organizations. And this is how they're located and manifested for flights. I'm happy to provide more information to you as well.
Thank you very much. Madam Kwan, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and please do.
On the behalf of the committee, I would like to thank all the three witnesses, Mr. Spencer Churchill, Ms. Hansen, and Ms. Rezai to be here today. And I would also like to thank the interpreter, for dealing with this situation that we have faced today. And Mr. Bruno Decep, in directly or indirectly, I didn't mean to blame the technicians. All I said is that we'll take the assistance from them, and I want to thank on all of us on our behalf. I want to thank the technicians as well, and dealing with this. And I know it's a stressful situation, so please accept our big thank you, interpreters, technicians, technical team, Madam Clerk, and of course, the witnesses that were here today as our guests.
Mr. President.
Mr. Chairperson, I never thought that just for a second, so please don't be concerned.
But I never said that, and I never thought that, think that. Don't worry about it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, all the best. And I'm going to adjourn the meeting. Meeting is now adjourned.
Merci. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.